Aye Aye Captain Douche is the 15th episode of the 7th season of Two and a Half Men. This is directed by James Widdoes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. It's a good episode. It gets genuinely really emotional at one point. It picks up where the last episode left off, with Charlie panicking that Chelsea has decided to run off into the sunset with Brad. Those are my words, not his. But he's certainly concerned that she's decided she wants to be with Brad, even though she has just met him. And then she comes home quite quickly. Everything seems fine. There's no indication that there's any problem. They go to bed, and then Charlie says some unkind things, including about Brad's deceased wife, which was maybe a little uncalled for. He ends up sleeping on the couch. Berta then comes in singing, which was an absolute delight. And then Alan comes down for breakfast, or I guess comes across the room for breakfast since his room's on the same floor. And that was a delightful scene. And Charlie is just not in the mood. He, of course, was sent down to sleep on the couch after his unkind things. But then Alan talks with him, and Alan says something that I thought was quite interesting. He says, if Chelsea's looking around for a better guy, why not make that guy you? And I have kind of two conflicting thoughts. One, everybody should just constantly strive to be the best version of themselves. And I would argue that Charlie is maybe not being the best version of himself. And I think that on the one hand, that's a good idea. But on the other, Alan is basically suggesting change who you are for Chelsea. And I don't agree with that. If Chelsea doesn't want to be with Charlie for who he is, then she shouldn't be with him. So on the one hand, yes, Charlie should try and be the best version of himself, but on the other hand, he shouldn't change who he is fundamentally just for Chelsea. So I'm kind of unsure with how I feel about that. But at the same time, Charlie could definitely just be a better version of himself. And he tries. He brings her juice, and he's saying all of the right things. And then he gets annoyed because she suggests that they go and do another charity thing for Brad. And he gets really annoyed because he thinks that this was her plan all along, and that she's asked him, but she knew he would never say yes to going along. So really, it's basically giving herself an excuse to be with Brad. Do I agree with that? No, I don't. But at the same time, I think that Charlie's concerns are reasonable, by which I mean if I was in Charlie's position, I might also feel the same way. But it also says a lot about Charlie that he was able to say immediately there was no way I was going to go with you, which doesn't make him look very good. So really, it's a very confusing episode with who we're meant to feel sorry for, who we're meant to believe, and that's kind of amplified with a scene in a moment. But before we get there, Evelyn comes over very briefly. Charlie gets very drunk. He sleeps in bed with Alan, and then Chelsea phones and asks to meet him for coffee, because she has left. She's not coming back for the night. And Charlie goes to meet her. And there was one decision they made in this scene that I thought was maybe a little too extreme. I really didn't like it. They meet for coffee, and Chelsea admits that she was interested in Brad. And this is where it gets confusing, because who are we meant to feel sorry for? Who are we meant to side with? Well, in my opinion, that becomes clear in a moment. But Chelsea admitting that basically says, yes, Charlie, you were right to be concerned about these things. Whereas up until this point, it feels like he was overreacting. And it was more about him changing, which again, a bit of a grey area. But Chelsea admitting that basically told Charlie, you were right to be concerned. And she didn't do anything with Brad. Chelsea is still ultimately a good person. And the fact that she's willing to admit she had feelings, in a way, I guess does make her a very honest person, at the very least. And, well, then things fall apart because Charlie vomits on a baby. It was not necessary, and I didn't like it. They were definitely going for the comedy aspect, maybe. But also maybe they were going for, look at the state that Charlie's in. He cared so much about Chelsea, he got so drunk and vomited on a baby, but also he got that drunk that he vomited on a baby. Do we feel sorry for him for being that upset? Or do we feel irritated that he was that irresponsible? And I don't think there's a right answer there, but I just wish it didn't happen because it was unpleasant. I really didn't like it. But then we have the scene where I think it's clear that we are meant to feel at least a little sorry for Charlie. And it was genuinely one of the most emotional scenes in the show ever, because Chelsea's called off the wedding, which I think anybody could have seen coming. And Charlie's standing out on the deck. And Evelyn walks up behind him and says that she heard about the wedding, and Charlie is clearly devastated. In fact, it was the moment when Charlie turned around from vomiting on a baby and realised Chelsea had gone. She'd left the coffee shop. And it was genuinely devastating because Charlie was clearly hurt by this. Whether or not it's because of his own actions, up for debate. But it was an emotional moment. And then we lead into Charlie on the deck with Evelyn. Evelyn saying all of the right things, supporting Charlie. There was not really one joke there. I mean, Evelyn made a joke about how if you're going to vomit on a baby, most people do it on their own baby. But other than that, there wasn't really a lot of comedy in that scene. And we were left to focus on how much Charlie was hurting. And again, maybe one could argue that it's Charlie's own fault. But at the same time, I do think he's tried. I do think he made an effort. And I do think he's in a lot of pain. And it was genuinely a really difficult scene to sit through. And that's how we end the episode. And it was beautiful. It was very, very well done. And the fact that Evelyn was there to support him, I thought was really lovely. It was a really beautiful moment, but it was a challenging moment as well. And in general, it's quite a powerful episode. I feel like it needed to be 2 parts. I think I said in my previous discussion that I wasn't sure yet if I thought it needed to be 2 parts, if we needed to carry the whole Brad story over to another episode. But yeah, I feel like we needed that build up for that final scene, or I guess those 2 final scenes, to be as impactful as they were. So yeah, I definitely don't mind them being 2 parts. And ultimately, I Captain Douche. While it had some funny moments, mostly from Alan and Berta, I feel like it was definitely quite a heavier episode. And it worked really well. Enjoyable for the right reasons, emotional for other reasons, but ultimately it's a really solid episode of 2.5 Men.